Hi, I'm David, and we're here on EV World News, where we talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm here today with Bill Moore, our editor and founder. How's it going, Bill?
Good morning.
All right. Well, first off, we're going to talk a little bit about a new Nissan Electric Sports Car. I'm hoping they release this in the US. It's a nice look. This is coming from Electric. Looks a lot, I was commenting, it looks a lot like a Porsche 911. And
Yeah,
so it's got a
it's
real nice look to it, if nothing else.
yeah,
And
except for the headlights in the front, and that looks like, as I commented earlier, it looks like the headlights on the new Fiat 500e.
it
Very
does. It
similar. Yeah,
does.
but
Yeah.
it's a pretty cool looking car. I would drive one.
I'm wondering if this is going to be a Europe only car. The article's not real specific because the talks
Yeah.
are, it's
Well,
definitely a European article.
yeah. The other articles that have been reporting on what Nissan is doing is that by 2030 they will no longer be selling gasoline powered cars. Everything that they're going to be selling in Europe will be electric drive. And so
Well,
I am guessing that for the time being, this will probably be focused on Europe.
Well, in the EU, from country to country, there's ambiguous changes in the laws. I
Yeah.
saw some of the stuff in the UK got rolled back, and now I see where people are complaining. Well, if the time is rolled back, then they may not get infrastructure put in their towns
Yeah.
for charging stations. And, one of the things that doesn't get addressed real well in this whole industry is people that rent apartments, and their situation is different than those of us who live in a house. EVs are really far more practical for those of us who live in a house who also can have solar on our house,
Yeah.
than the situation for people that rent. And you have
Yeah.
to remember, half the people in the United States rent, and I'm sure in Europe it's probably even higher. I know
Yeah.
in France it's popular to own property to rent out, but to rent your own residence. So different countries it's a little different. But yeah, I see this where Nissan is going to only do electric vehicles by 2030 in Europe.
Now,
But
speaking of the thing with people in rentals, and I got to look into a little bit more, but apparently the Governor Pritzker, yeah, it's Pritzker, I think, in Illinois has signed a bill that will allow and actually require if somebody is a renter and wants to put in electric, go to the expense of putting in a charger for their car, they will be allowed to do that. And if they don't, if they're not allowed to do that, then there is, I think, a $500 fine. And I'm trying, but what I don't know is that against the landlord or is that against the owner? That I have to get some clarification on. But apparently, they're taking some fairly aggressive action in Illinois to address that very issue.
that still only really addresses somebody who lives in a house.
No, no. Well, no. It looks like from the example that they gave is the guy actually lives in an apartment complex.
Well, that will be interesting to see how they
Yep.
resolve that. Because one of my friends, he was renting a place in Fort Lauderdale, and they had charging stations in the parking garage, and we went and looked, and it was 34 cents a kilowatt to charge in there, which would make it
Ouch.
would make it more expensive than buying gasoline.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty
uh,
high.
yeah, I thought that was a little ridiculous. It's like, so like the charging stations were there, but that really isn't a fair example. If you're renting, you would expect to be able to get it at,
Well,
let's
yeah,
say even
the
17 cents.
landlord is obviously looking to make a profit. Now,
Right.
I don't know because that's probably for Florida, uh, Florida Light and Power. Here in Nebraska, I don't think they can do that because you're not allowed as a consumer or even as a business to sell electricity by the kilowatt. You can only sell it by the time period.
Oh, interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. That could be something different. Nissan announced that they had hit 1 million global EV sales in July. It's been a decade since they first
Yeah.
released the Nissan Leaf.
Yep.
Let's see. So this car is called the Urban Concept 20-23 EV. Propel. It's all electric future plans. It's got a neat look there on the side. Interesting wheels. It's interesting how with the wheel going, it looks like it
No, yeah, what I understand they
gone.
did, this was designed by some of their younger designers, and apparently they took their cue for some of these designs from computer games.
Oh yeah. Oh look at those doors. Oh,
Yeah,
that's fancy.
yep,
Oh
yep.
yeah, that'll be hot. I Let's see here. Doesn't really give a lot of information. You know, this Araya they're showing it's kind of
Yeah, that particular car, by the way, a young couple is driving one of those from the North Pole to the South Pole.
wow.
Yeah, and I think they put on. What did I see that they've made their way across North America, and now at some point they have to bridge the gap and then get moving south through South America.
They're looking at getting battery pack costs down to $75 per kilowatt. You know, that's one of the big things with the adoption of EVs as the batteries become cheaper and the battery packs become cheaper, you're going to see huge drop-offs. I mean, I expect eventually that to lop the price off of a lot of your EVs by like $10,000. The,
Oh
the
yeah,
ones that have like a 400-mile range. So I think that's a lot of it is if people see that these EVs have a 400 more mile or longer range, they're going to get over this range anxiety.
yeah.
And that so many people do have, and that will
It's
definitely
yeah. It's I
help
mean,
out.
what the only time I've experienced any kind of rain. Of course, I don't. Again, my car is a city car. That's what it was designed for. The only range anxiety I felt was last winter when I had to drive out of town to go give kind of a talk similar to the one I gave there on Saturday to a group of electrical engineers and utility engineers. But it was cold. It was cold out. It was winter time. I was on a highway, and boy, anytime you take a car on the highway at highway speeds, you can see your available range estimate starts to go down. So that was the only time I felt it. But then again, I when I got home, I think I had still 40% state of charge in the battery, so I really didn't have anything to worry about. But I don't. Again, I don't. I know the limitations of the car, and I'm not going to push it.
All right. Well, our next article we're going to talk about is something going over on Searcy, Arkansas, with a solar farm, battery storage, the backbone of a reliable electric grid, but adoption uneven. This is kind of interesting. So in Searcy, Arkansas, they have 800 acres that they have solar panels and they have banks of batteries. This is about 50 miles northeast of Little Rock, Arkansas.
Okay.
They're producing 100 megawatts of solar energy there, and it's the only hybrid asset in its territory managed by Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. They coordinate the electric grid in all or part of 15 states. Let's see.
Hmm.
Part of a bigger company that also runs utilities in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. The batteries are housed in 6 containers across the site and can store up to 30 megawatts and charged by power that comes from the panels, meaning juice that the grid can't use at any given moment would otherwise have been wasted.
Yeah. Well, that's
And
that's
that's
that's the direction we're going. It's I think I posted an article today that uh, everybody recognizes it, although it's uneven. There are areas
it
where
is.
it's they're doing a lot with that, and others where they haven't gotten to that point. So
Well, I've talked to you a little bit about I have friends in private equity that fund some of these big solar projects like this. And right now, interest rates are too high
yeah,
for them to make the projects profitable. Let's see what it says here. For wind and solar, grid operators have to consider when resources will be operating, since an additional megawatt of wind and solar will presumably be producing and not producing at the same time as existing wind and solar on the system. This is one of the problems they're having in California is they have so much solar between 11 and 2
Mhm.
that the grid can't take it all in. And then they use the most power between 4 and 9
Right.
PM, and
Exactly.
then the wind for some reason, wind power is strongest at 1 AM,
Yep.
which I thought was kind of fascinating. But they have this disconnect between when the green energy is most available and when they need it
Right.
most. Now, now when I did that interview with Emporia Energy, so for places like in California where the price of electricity goes up at 4 p.m., there's one of their intelligent management systems will make it so you cool your house down by 3 to 4 degrees right before four
Right.
o'clock, and then turn your AC off
Yep.
for a few hours during those peak times so it cuts down on your
Well,
electric bill.
we're actually doing that here with people that have the smart thermostat here in Omaha, and the utility actually can take, and if it senses that it's going to be, a really hot day in the afternoon, and everybody's got their air conditioner running, it'll run your air conditioner for down to where the house is comfortable, and then they can turn the air conditioner off remotely during that sort of peak period. So we get through that, and then they give you back control of your air conditioner. So we're actually doing that here.
Well, I got kind of a fun one here to discuss. This is a map of the most
Yeah,
searched
yeah,
electric
yeah. That's it.
vehicles by
That's
country.
interesting.
Yeah, so this, let me see if I can make this just a little bit bigger here. And we'll look and see what some of these are here. I mean, I've never heard of a whole lot of these manufacturers, so that makes things kind of interesting.
Yeah, the people who put this together really did a comprehensive job on this, and that chart is available obviously through the EV World editor, what I call my five editors' choices. So
Mhm.
if you go over to evworld.com, you can see that chart and then link to the entire article. So yeah, it's it. This surprised me. The second most popular car being searched is the Model 3. And the most popular car being searched for is an electric version of the Lexus. And I had
Lexus
no
first fully
idea that
electric
Lexus was
car,
actually what? Lexus is making an electric car, but either they
the
are or they're
Lexus
planning to
RZ.
soon. But yeah, something like 47 countries leads in the search. These are people searching for information on electric models, and the most searched for one was the Lexus electric model.
That is very interesting to see. This is that Lexus RZ all electric. I'd never even heard of it.
Well, I hadn't either. I don't even know if they. Well, again, they uh, there's so many models now that frankly, I just can't keep up with them all. When there were
Well,
four or five
okay, so
models, it was easy, but now we've got what in the 60 or 70 models, something like that.
700 people searched for that Lexus RZ in Afghanistan. So
Wow, the Taliban are getting up to speed here.
they are. The yeah, they're very apparently they're very woke there in Afghanistan, and that's quite interesting. The Tesla Model 3 came in second
Yeah.
across country, and the Kia EV6 ranked third.
By the
It's
way,
kind of interesting.
we had that model over at the National Drive Electric Week event here that I participated in this past Saturday.
I saw that there,
Yeah,
and I was talking about that with one of the car dealers there. That interesting looking vehicle. Um, let's see. Oh, Croatians. The Rimac Navara
right.
was the most searched in all the Balkan countries.
Yeah,
In India, the Tata Nexon
yeah,
dominated, and it's interesting. The VinFast EVs were top of interest in 13 countries, which I thought, but not Vietnam, which was most interested in the Lexus RZ.
yeah.
China, the results favored the Model 3,
Over the
although
BYD,
it
huh?
was outsold by the BYD.
Yeah,
And what's interesting is Google isn't the most used search engine in China. So the results were probably even a little skewed against the Model 3.
yeah,
Most Googled vehicle in America. Oh God.
yeah.
Tesla
Tesla.
Model 3, almost every state except for Oregon, Maine, and Vermont, which was the Hyundai Ioniq. I know for a few years you couldn't get the Ioniq in our part of the country. And I'm
I
not
actually saw my very first Ionic in Everett. Well, in the Everett Mill Creek area. I was, driving my daughter's car, and I was going to pick her up, and right next to me was an Ionic. That's a nice looking car. It really is.
It is. Oh, I've seen them here in Omaha. I've seen a
Oh,
few.
really? I haven't. I have.
Yeah, they do exist, but I suspect they were California people who, brought them here. But the Cadillac Lyric, #1 in Michigan, it's interesting kind of to see, but almost every place was in the United States was the Tesla Model 3.
And
But anyways,
speaking of Michigan, today we make history because the President of the United States, Joe Biden, is going to walk the picket line this afternoon in support of the UAW strike in Detroit. Historians have never are not aware of any instances where an American president has actually walked a union picket line. So, of course, then the other guy, who shall go nameless, my opinion, is going to show up at the in Detroit as well and give a talk. Um, and he's been warned by the UAW, don't show up. So
interesting.
yeah, it's so he has his number one of his leading campaign efforts is to disparage electric cars. He's taken deliberate aim at electric cars, as well as have others of that particular political persuasion. So, since I support electric cars, you know which side of that argument I come down on.
Yeah, but this is kind of a mixed argument because the UAW, a lot of their issues is how to deal with
Job
the electric
security and
cars
how to
and the
deal with
people.
that transition. Absolutely. The interesting thing
Yes.
is, I put an article up that shows that his calculations show that while it takes, I think it was 80 man hours, something like that, to produce a standard gasoline car, it
Hmm.
takes something like 90 or 100 hours to produce an EV. So you're
Hmm.
actually creating more jobs with electric cars than you are supposedly with gasoline. I am not a statistician. I don't know, after a while, you start seeing so many of these reports that you sort of wonder, how many of those
Well,
reports were bought by, financial interests to get those results. So I'm always skeptical about those things, but that's an interesting
I always
argument.
look I always look for bias in everything,
Yeah.
you know. And but one of the things that people who are in the aftermarket auto parts industries, they're the ones, in my opinion, are going to be the most hurt by EVs because there's not as much that breaks down in
Yeah.
an electric car. You don't have as many, electric engine parts. You don't have the
How
transmissions.
how
There's all
how
kinds of
many
things.
oil change shops are going to be
Right.
affected? How many brake shops are going to be affected? Here in Omaha, one of the leading advertisers on television is a company that rebuilds transmissions. How long will it be before that company is impacted by the fact that there aren't any of these gigantic, 6-speed transmissions to overhaul anymore? So yeah, it's going to be a change, absolutely.
Yeah, I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talking a couple days ago, talking about how from 1910 to 1930, the transition from horses to cars, all the industries that went bankrupt as a result of people no longer using horses, and the fact that you couldn't give away a horse in 1930.
I will share a piece with you. I spent an early part of my life. I was probably, I don't know, 6 years old in Hamburg, Iowa. And we lived on a house on the north side of town. And beyond that was just country and stuff like that. And I remember that there was a guy who would come through periodically with his horse and wagon going clip clopping down the main street. He was still using a horse and wagon for, I think, I don't know if he was a rag collector. You remember they had guys that did that, collected rags and things. Um, but he was, still using a horse and wagon. And of course, my dad,
It's a
my dad, when he grew up on an Iowa farm, and he spent a lot of his time with his grandparents, and they had horses. They didn't have a tractor, so he grew up with doing farm work with horses. So that was 30s. So
okay, okay.
well, I'm
Anyways,
not
well,
that
Bill,
far
I think
removed
that's.
from that era.
I hear you. I hear you. I'm well, anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and cut the stream for
All
today.